Madam Chair, let me first begin. Thank you for your questions, and I want to thank Secretary Clinton for being here. I'd like to ask two questions. One about Iran, recognizing that some parts of that question have already been asked and answered, and the second about Syria. President Kennedy established a doctrine with respect to the Soviet Union and the response to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The State Department presented evidence at the UN to justify that doctrine. Former President George Bush provided so-called evidence through Colin Powell, Secretary, regarding weapons of mass destruction at the UN with respect to Iraq. And Iraq is obviously a very long way from home, but it justified, from his perspective, subsequent actions. I'm hoping that the U.S. will establish a clear doctrine, present the necessary evidence about Iran's clear and present danger to the national security interests of the United States. My first question to you is, what is that doctrine? It needs to be, from my perspective, stated in very clear and very unequivocal terms. And we can talk about whether or not sanctions have worked or have not worked. As you probably know, Congressman Pence and I sponsored a letter calling for crippling sanctions on Iran. There has been significant progress, as you've stated, towards that end. But the fact of the matter is we have yet to hear, at least I have yet to hear, as clear a statement as President Kennedy made with respect to the Cuban Missile Crisis, or as clear a statement as the Bush administration made with respect to so-called evidence in Iraq with respect to weapons of mass destruction. I'm hoping to hear what that doctrine is, that doctrine that emanates from the United States, from the government, from the president, that states in clear and unequivocal terms that Iran and their acquisition of a nuclear weapon represents a clear threat to the national security of the United States. The second question regards Syria. And I know that a number of members have talked about it in our relatively private conversations, but we've heard it enough now. Can you explain to the committee the difference between the U.S. involvement in Libya versus U.S. involvement in Syria? The President used a humanitarian rationale when first asked about the Libyan crisis. He said, "Not on my watch are we going to allow Muammar Gaddafi to launch unprecedented attacks on civilian populations." It seems to me, Madam Secretary, that we have the power and the technology to stop mortar fire into homes within civilian populations within Syria, and yet I think the world anxiously waits the international community's response to what can only be described as crimes against humanity and barbaric treatment by launching military mortars into civilian populations. I recognize that the United States has a very unique position in the world in that there's only leadership that the United States in some of these measures can provide because of our sheer power, both demonstrated in that part of the world, but also because of our technological capacity to do something about it. Madam Secretary, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, those are two very important questions, Congressman. I will do my best to answer at least the first, and then perhaps on a second round I can get to the second, because I think they both deserve a thorough response. First, let me reiterate that the President's policy is the prevention of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons because of the grave threat to regional stability that such an acquisition poses. It's not only the intimidation that will increase from Iran, a well-founded member of the terrorist state company in the world, but one that uses proxies and agents to spread terrorism against the United States, against our friends and allies, and uses a very serious campaign of destabilizing many countries in the region and beyond. And it is not just the United States that holds this view. The recent report by the International Atomic Energy Agency by the Director General, Mr. Amano, records in detail the evidence of the possible military dimensions of Iran's nuclear program. And there was a near unanimous resolution at the November board meeting expressing deep and increasing concern about Iran's nuclear program. This latest report, dated February 24th, comes in the wake of two senior-level IAEA visits to Tehran on January 29-31 and February 2021. Despite calls to cooperate with the IAEA, Iran did not do so. The most significant part of this report is that despite having requested access to the Parchin explosive testing site during both visits, Iran denied the agency delegation any access. It was surprising because it raises suspicions. If there is no nuclear weapons program, what does Iran have to hide? If there is no nuclear weapons program, why are they putting their nuclear centrifuges deep underground? If there is no nuclear weapons program that is intended, why don't they clearly state so? And the other piece of information in the Director General's report is that Iran has begun enriching near 20% low-enriched uranium at Fordo, the underground facility near the city of Qom. So if you look, Congressman, at the IAEA reports, which are not the U.S. talking, but the international community talking, there are many other reasons why we have a strong basis of concern. And, you know, finally, the threat posed by Iran, if they get to breakout capacity, and certainly if they develop a nuclear weapon and a delivery system on, you know, medium and long-term missiles, will most certainly provoke a race to nuclear capacity by the region. So what already is, by many accounts, the most dangerous part of the world, one in which we have a great stake because of the production of oil and gas, will become much more unstable. So I think there is a strong argument to support the President's policy, and I commend to you the IAEA findings, because I think that's an independent source of support.
Mr. Wolf. Mr. Dant.